Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this important program. I'm Dan Kuntz, Mohs CPA's Senior Director of Professional Development. Recent events have brought renewed focus on social justice issues, and there is real momentum for action and change. Members want to make a difference in their own organization and community, but may not be sure how to do that. Diversity and inclusion has been one of the main pillars of our strategic plan for years. We recently sent a statement to all members taking a stand against racial injustice, and we remain committed to creating awareness, recruiting, retaining, and advancing minorities in our profession. Our Diversity and Inclusion Committee met last month to review our strategies and to establish new initiatives for the coming year, which includes today's webinar. We are in the process of enhancing our Diversity and Inclusion resource webpage, and we will be adding more learning opportunities soon. In addition, we are working on a mentoring program and planning outreach to firms and companies with resources on how to create workplaces that value diversity, equity, and inclusion. Though these topics can be difficult to discuss, dialogue is essential. We appreciate your participation today, and please do not hesitate to ask any questions via the Zoom chat function. We are all here to learn and grow. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our presenter, Dr. Florence Holland. Florence is the lead manager of pipeline initiatives in diversity and inclusion at the AICPA. She will help us better understand the importance of belonging in the workplace, teach us how to create a sense of belonging for others, and help us recognize bias and assumptions among us all. Florence, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Dan. It's a privilege and honor to be invited. I'm actually love your opening remarks, particularly around conversations. This has been, I was telling Lindsay and Dan a little while ago, I've been doing a number of these, and it is hard because this is a topic where, to your point, it's about conversations, it's about questions, it's about engaging each other to want to learn more. So I too highly encourage you, use the chat feature, chat amongst yourselves, ask questions. We will take questions to the end, and as I've told Lindsay and Dan, I'm committed that if I can't get to your question, that I will. I will also provide my contact information, even if you just want to have a conversation offline about something that you're doing personally, something professionally, and of course that your organizations are doing. So we have a limited amount of time. I have a lot to share, so I'm just going to jump right in. Again, please feel free to use your chat feature, ask those questions, and we'll get started. So this is our agenda for today. I'm going to do, I've kind of already done the welcome. We're going to do a slight kind of belonging introduction, a little anticipatory set, as I call it, by trade. Just fair warning, I was a K-12 math teacher, so I'm always looking for ways to engage. So there'll be quite a couple of activities I want you to participate in during today's session. We'll do an activity called TRAP. We'll be talking about how we can reimagine diversity and inclusion, how to create a sense of belonging, and then yes, hopefully again, making sure we leave time for questions and answers. Just some house rules that we will need to cover. I like to cover a lot when I'm out. One, I know it's a webinar, and I know Lindsay's going to help us with the polling to make sure that you're present, but also meaning in mind, right? To be present or absent. You know, basically try to be one or the other, but hopefully more present. So, you know, multitasking that we think our brains can do. And we're going to talk a lot about brain today and really how brain development goes. And so we want to be sure, though, that we're present and engaged. Vegas rules, again, normally we're in person, you know, what happens here stays here, but same, even in the chat. If you want to ask a question, as we say in the education world, no question is a stupid question. Please, please, please ask a question. And I promise you after this, I will not send Dan an email to say, who was that asking? No, I promise I will not. What happens here stays here. And then lastly, in any of this work, a rule that we use with our AICPA National Commission on Diversity and Inclusion, and one that I continue to adopt, today we're going to suspend our right to be offended. half of the conversation around diversity and inclusion and why we have been labeling it whether difficult conversations or we label it courageous conversations. We're labeling all of that because we're worried because we don't know if I'm going to offend someone, right? Even in that question, right? I don't know if I'm going to ask the right question. Again, we're in a society where being politically correct, we're scared if we post the wrong thing. Social media. In this session, we cannot grow if we're always on the verge of offensive and defensive. So for the next few moments that you're with me, I would just love to ask, we're going to suspend our right to be offended, even me as the instructor, so that we can actually, yes, get to the point of growth. So we're going to do a little activity here. I don't know, like a teacher, I guess I should have gave you a supply list, but hopefully you came prepared anyway with paper and a pencil or pen. That's really all you need. Somewhere where you're going to make across the line, meaning in this case, if we were in person, there would actually be a line on the ground and you would literally cross the line. But in this case, I want you on your paper or again, on this presentation, whatever you have in front of you, to cross the line, meaning with an X or a tally mark. And I'm going to read a number of statements to you. And I want you to place a tally mark, an X on your paper every time the statement that I read applies to you. Okay, so if you agree, not necessarily agree or can identify with the statement, I want you to put a tally mark on your paper. Okay, all right, are you ready? Give you a few moments, pencil, paper. All right, first one. I have spent more than 1 year of my adult life outside of the United States. I have spent more than 1 year of my adult life outside of the United States. I am not the first person. I am not the first person in my family to attain a college degree. English is my first language. English is my first language. I have never felt threatened because of my gender. I've never felt threatened because of my gender. Next, I've never felt threatened because of my political views. I have never felt threatened because of my race. I have never felt threatened because of my religious beliefs. I have never felt threatened because of my sexual orientation. If I should ever need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing a home in my area which I can afford and in which I want to live. I'll read it again. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and which I want to live. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute those choices to bad morals or poverty. I am never asked to speak for all of the people of my racial group. Just a few more. I can be pretty sure that if I was asked to talk to the person in charge at my firm or organization, I will be facing a person of my own race. I can easily buy posters, postcards, picture books, greeting cards, dolls, toys, and children magazines featuring people of my race. Last one. I can go home from most meetings of my firm or organization and belong to feeling somewhat tied in. Rather, I never have felt isolated. I've never felt out of place, never felt outnumbered, never felt unheard, never heard at a distance or feared. All right. Count up your X's, count up your tally marks. And I want you to, in the chat, tell me how many tally marks you have. Just chat your number. So if, 10 of those, 9, 8, 11. All right, 8, 11, 13, 9. All right. 6. See, couple 3s. All right. So for me, as the facilitator, let's think about it. If you really were to think, and I see some numbers that are 10, 12, 11, 15, I could probably make a bias, and we're going to be talking about bias, a bias assumption around probably what gender you are, what ethnic diversity group you may feel you belong to, what sexual orientation you belong to, what type of home environment you had, right? Even from just 10 questions, and I can't even see you all. I can't even meet you. I can probably make some assumption and biases. At the same token though, think about, and as we move into today's topics, we're gonna be talking about thinking about that and those that you answer, think about how that lens of you looks at the world. Think about how of those questions of what you answered, how that might frame how you recruit someone. Think about how it may reframe how you manage someone. Think about how it may reframe in terms of how you evaluate someone. And then as we talk more today, think about if you were a 13, a 12, and you were working with someone who was a 3. In terms of those questions, how would you build cohesiveness? Because you still have to work together, but how would you bring value to each other and not let those experiences impact the relationship? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So in any good thing, I told you I was a math teacher by trade. So any good way, I have to build the foundation for you. So everything we're going to be talking today in terms of belonging is truly related and steeped in, I promise you, theory. Diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity, equality, all of those things are, right now, to Dan's point, we can talk about social justice. We ought to do it because it's the right thing to do. We absolutely should. However, we should also do it because we know the theory and we know human experiences. We need it. And how do we know that? Maslow's. Anybody taking psychology 101 has learned Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? This is a motivational theory in psychology, right? That's 5 tiers. And we know based upon what he said is we cannot go to the next level until the first level is met, right? Or the previous levels are met. So think about when we say we want an organization that is operating at high level, we want a firm that is, making profit, that has these environments where we are fitting all of our business lines, that would somewhat go to the top of the tier. That would be considered, self-actualization, like the firm has arrived, we're doing it. But think about the people in your organization, if they're stuck somewhere in 1, 2, or 3. And look, that belonging is right in there of almost that foundation bottom point. That purely what we're saying is, it's going to be hard for someone to be their, as we call it, whole self at work, giving you their all and best that they are, if they have not yet even had a sense of belonging at your organization. So that's where we're coming, that belonging is a basic human need. And what if we relate that to race and racism, or however you want to talk about it, race and all of that was a construct to what? Separate us so that we knew who belonged, quote unquote, and who did not. But how that all relates still goes back to basic human need. And that when you think about it, this belonging has nothing to do with race. It's just us as humans. We all want to feel that we belong. I did not ask the question. Sometimes in the crossing, I will ask the question, whoever would you say did not get picked when, back in the day, you used to pick someone on the playground to play, like you had to pick your teams. And I've been in that case. The longer that you're on the sideline not getting picked, you're kind of looking at yourself like, what's wrong with me? I must not be good at basketball, right? We all knew who was getting picked. And you're like, wait a minute. We've all not been the first to be picked. And think about just that feeling in yourself and how that might have affected you. And even ultimately, or even in that particular game, how it might have affected you, right? So belonging is a basic need, period. That's the foundation of what we're going to be talking about today. I told you again, I'm a teacher, so let's go straight to, the definition, Webster's definitions, right? More so what we're going to be talking about are those two kind of in the middle. To be a member or a part of. So when we're talking about belonging, again, we're talking about individually, but as you're thinking and putting this in mind frame of your firms and your organizations, do people feel that they are part of your organization? Not again what you think, because sometimes we might think we are if we're the leader, because we think we're doing such an amazing job. But what's data to show that they feel that they're a part and that they feel that they belong? Do people fit in? And good or bad, sometimes we use fit on the opposite side when we're recruiting, right? We say they didn't make a good fit. They're not a good fit. And what does that mean? You think that they're not going to belong or fit into your environment, okay? So again, we're talking about fitting in, linked to, people feeling like they have a home, people feeling like they have a rightful place to be in your organization, that they can be themselves and feel what? At home. So 5 major qualities. How will you know if someone says, I do belong here? Then they're probably saying these things. They're probably saying, 1, I have a shared sense of identity. We see people in the group we belong to as us. This comes into that, organization where people say, and people say this a lot, and I sometimes cringe when I hear it, we are a family here. And I go, does everybody feel that they're family here? Right? Taking work to a family is like really a big step. But they're saying, I feel so entwined with these people. They could be like my family, right? That's what people are saying when they say that. A shared destiny, the belief that what happens to you might also happen to me. This is where, again, we try to, I shouldn't say it like this, but this is what I say, indoctrinate people into our vision, right? We put it all over our walls in our firms and organizations, right? We put out our strategic plan and we have whole webcasts on, this is the goal, this is what we're pushing towards, right? That's because we're trying to create a shared destiny. We're trying to say we're all in this together and we're working towards this goal. A sense of interdependence. Now, that was the first part of my statement right now. We're all in this together, right? We're trying to put in that we are relying on each other. I don't know if you've noticed, most of the commercials that quickly came out in the coronavirus pandemic, what was the theme? We're all in this together. We're all in this together. Because we were trying to create this shared interdependence, that what was happening to you was happening to me in some way, and so we should feel something. It's the same thing that we need to create in our organizations. A general sense of shared values, and that goes again to what I talked about in terms of, again, what are the values? A lot of people spend a lot of time coming up with a company and or a firm's values and making sure that they're embedded in what they do. And number 5 is what I call the key as it relates to diversity and inclusion, however, that we see the theme happens the most. It's ability for people to feel fully able to be themselves. That's that whole premise around coming to work and you being your whole self. Meaning that when I pull up in my car, I don't have to think of, okay, Florence, when you go in here, you know, leave that you're from Baltimore in here. Leave that you have 3 African-American young boys that you may be fearful in this car. Leave that you're actually, when I travel quite a bit, good or bad, I'll tell you a real one. I don't all the time tell people I'm from Alabama. People have depending upon their frame of reference, saying you're from Alabama could, you know, spark some very interesting conversations. So sometimes when I figure out where I am, I leave that in the car, right? So being able to be your whole self, that's extremely important, especially when we talk about belonging. Just some stats of why this is important. Again, just building a business case. And again, how it extends past just race and gender. People feel isolated. And OMG, I'm waiting for all of the research projects to come out, particularly after now our pandemic. Do we ever more than not feel the need to belong? Think about, why did people start having, you know, happy hour nights on Zoom? Now we're having cooking things on Zoom. Now, I mean, everything is on Zoom. I just finished talking to Lindsay and Dan. My 79-year-old mom is, you know, I gotta figure out this Zoom thing. Why? Because we're trying to feel like we belong to something. Because one, we're tired of just belonging to our kids at home. If you have kids at home, I told you I have 3. I'm like, somebody else, please, an adult in my life. And that's because of some of these stats. And that was before the pandemic. So these stats, oh my goodness, are going to even go up, right? As Americans, we do feel lonely. It's up from that. We feel that we may not have trusted confidence. Our ability to have empathy for others is, you know, been on the decline. Think about, again, I say it like this, you know, even when we drive home, we drive and we go to our house, right? I talked about how your ability to, you know, buy a home and live wherever. And I think about it like this, and I catch myself sometimes. I drive into my subdivision, right? I've made it, I have my subdivision. And then I open the garage button, then I drive in, and then I close the garage button, right? Like, so now I have more house, more space, have a garage, I close it, but yet I'm creating what? More isolation. Right? I grew up in Baltimore. There was no garage. When you got out your car, every neighbor that was outside, you saw them. You had to wave, like, hey, how you doing? Right? There were front porches that you sat on. I haven't sat on my front porch. I think I sat on it the other day. That's probably the first in like 4 months. I prefer to what? Sit on my patio, which is in the back of my house with a privacy fence. Right? So we've created this like feelings of isolation, but we've created it almost in the things that we do. Let's just be clear though, we know, and that's what I say where the research is coming from in a lot of the articles now, we know that isolation, particularly social isolation, is going to do what? It impacts our health at all levels. You know, individuals with fewer social ties are at a greater risk of dying from cancer and heart disease. Subjects with fewer social connections died at more than twice the rate, right? All of this, more likely to have illness, smoking, obesity, high blood pressure. And this is actually a lot of the research that's going into whether students should return to school, right? Mainly we're saying we know it's probably not going to be safe necessarily, despite with all of their things, but it's essential for what? Our kids' social well-being. Right? And we say kids are social creatures. They have to go to school, but it's the same for us. We're social beings too that just have learned to adapt, but we're looking for ways to engage. We're looking for ways to feel that we what? Belong. So I put it like this. Social media and the world that we live in has created what? We have 1 million friends and they're almost all imaginary. The key of me, but for me, going to like, conventions and things where like I finally would meet someone that I've been like liking all their stuff on LinkedIn for like a year. I'm like, oh, you're my LinkedIn friend. Like we've just been liking each other's posts. Same yesterday, and then I'll move on from our business case. Me and my husband were in Walmart, and now of course we have on masks, and somebody's just a waving, and he goes, do you know them? And I'm like, I don't know them. And then my very first thing was like, I think maybe that's some lady from my Facebook page. What? Like, I got all these friends, I don't even know what they look like in person for real. They're just my friends on Facebook because now I'm in these different mom groups, right? So we have to work on, if that's what we're doing in our individual life, think about then what happens at work. The opposite side of this, though, is just this whole theme of we do operate and we were birthed into tribalism, right? You're a part of a tribe. You're one of us. You're either one of us or you're one of them, right? And it does create this sense of what? Survival, the sense of I have to protect that safety, and that anybody that is not me is what? Dangerous, or could be a competition. It's uncertain. So we're dealing with isolation. We're dealing with this tribalism things that we're put in. You're one of me, right? And again, think about how we operate high schools and colleges. The whole thing is what? We're trying to indoctrinate people that I live in Auburn, Alabama, but I live in Alabama. And if anybody knows college sports, I tell people, we make children choose here in Alabama at the daycare level. I'll never forget, my kids, my oldest went to daycare, and they had college day at the daycare. And I was like, what's that? I'm like, oh, yay, y'all are going to talk about college. Now, he was a baby, take it. But I'm like, maybe you're going to read a book or something. It was like, no, you need to put on a onesie of which college you're representing. And here in Alabama, it's either Roll Tide or War Eagle, right? And I was like, what? Who does that? So we're very early trying to make people choose which tribe they belong to and which ones they're going to support. So what we have to work on as individuals, though, is this, that diversity is being invited to the party, right? That's for us in this diversity world, like you want to count heads. That's how I attribute it, right? We have so many women here. We have so many African Americans here. You invited us to the office. You invited us to the party. But inclusion is being, once I came to the party, am I going to get to dance here? Like, are you going to ask me to dance, or are you just going to let me sit on the sideline? And then the next step to belonging, though, is does that person feel that they can dance like no one's watching, right? Can they just be what? Their whole self, that it won't matter. Yes, Dan, that I'm going to party, and however I get it, I can get it. And yes, accountants, you can dance. CPAs, you can dance. We did this joke, and it's a whole nother story. I'll have to share another day. But we did a session with some students, and it was called To Tell the Truth. And it was like, you have to stand like the real CPA, what they stand. And we had these fake questions posted, right? And one of the questions was, what's your favorite dance move? And then I would make them show it. And it was, the students loved it because they couldn't believe that actually there were some CPAs that could what? That could dance, right? So yes, CPAs dancing, Sharon. Yes, I know you got it in you. You can dance. So we have to keep thinking again, though, about belonging. And so just very quickly, you know, what then are we talking about? What are the areas that people may not feel they belong in? And I'll go back, I'm clicking too soon, is around all of these elements, right? And so again, when we talk diversity and inclusion, we spend a lot of time on the top of the iceberg, but just look at this picture. How much of the top of the iceberg is there compared to the bottom? We're so much more than this top of the iceberg. So even when we're talking about belonging and we're like, but yes, we have employee resource groups for Blacks or African Americans. That's great, but that's only helping belonging on one element. What about, do we have employee resource groups for people who are divorced? Do we have employee resource groups for people who are single parents? Do we have employee resource groups for, you know, people that aren't from here? And I'm so serious. Again, living in Alabama, and I'm from Baltimore, like I need an employee resource group in my own personal, it's almost like in my personal clubs. I need a group for people to help me how this works. So when we think about belonging, we have to think about it not only from the visible parts, how are we helping demographically and things visibly, the top part, but even at the bottom, the part that is so much more to us. And the intersectionality, as we call it, of all of these. Because I could have things all the way at the top and everything at the bottom. And so I need to feel that I belong to your organization on multiple levels. So we know diversity makes us smarter. We know it makes us smarter. So what gets in the way of that? We know that. Everybody says diversity of thought. We need it. We gotta have it for the most part. But then what gets in the way of that? Ding, bias, what we call micro inequities, fear, stereotypes. We've never done it that way. Oh, we always do it like this. Oh, we want to be seen as fair. If we do it for one, oh my goodness, what would they say if we do it for somebody else? So this is what gets in the way. And so we're going to do a quick activity here. I want you to look at these images. I'm going to show you images on the screen. Again, I'm going to show you some images, and I want you at first thought for you to pick who you would want to be trapped in the elevator with for 3 hours. Okay? Who would you want to be trapped in the elevator with for 3 hours? All I can give you is the pictures. Okay? So here we go. This is overall pictures, and then I'm going to go through each one. Number 1. So write down on your paper if you would want to be trapped in the elevator with number 1. Number 2. You would want to be trapped in the elevator with number 2. What about number 3? Number 4? Number 5? And number 6. And I'm going to put all of them back up again. So out of the 6, who would you want to be trapped in the elevator with? Choose that. And then if you want to, go ahead and in the chat, you can put a quick note, which one you picked, and if you want to, why. Okay, so 1 through 6, which one did you pick and why? I got a few number 1s. People like number 1. Okay, I got a vote for 6. Okay. Yay, number 3. Somebody picked, I call him Man Bun, which is totally biased, but that's what I call him. He has a man bun. But not many 3s. Okay, 1, 2, 4. Okay, so this is the thing as you're looking at why people pick. Normally what we hear is because they're smiling, right? Somebody picked them because they were smiling. And if I'm going to be trapped for 3 hours, oh my God, I want to be trapped with someone I think can smile, right? Some people say, I want to be trapped with number 3 as a man, but he looks very interested. And I want to understand how he got all that hair to grow and how he got the man bun and even to have some conversations with him. Some people, number 4, end up picking where a particularly student sometimes will pick number 4 and they will say because she looks older. And so maybe she actually could help me get out of the elevator, right? So they're thinking, oh, age must equal some level of wisdom, right? Some people then saying will pick number 4 and they say, because she then reminds me of my mother and I'm going to be freaking out in this elevator. So I need someone who can calm me down, right? So again, I say all that normally even out of the 6, people come up with the reasons why. And sometimes there's a whole story around it. And you don't know anything about it. There were some serial killers who also smiled, I'm pretty sure, right? But we don't know anything about it. We have done what? We've tried to very quickly in our brain create what? A bias, right? We have created, again, an assumption. We've created, again, our brain, what we call it, lazy brain, tried to say, okay, people that tend to smile, tend to be nice, so I pick her. We don't know anything about her. Right? So when we think about this work, we're talking about 3 things. Assumptions, something that is accepted as true. We have no proof. That's what we all just did. We all just made an assumption. We have no proof, none whatsoever. And I promise you, I have no proof. Those are all stock photos. I know none of those people. I don't know anything about them. But how it impacts us is then we have stereotypes, which are widely held but fixed and oversimplified. So even in that, we will take the assumption, turn it into a stereotype because it happens quite a few times, right? And then bias, though, may be some prejudice in favor or against. So we've taken it a little further, and sometimes those can be considered unfair. So again, when I tell you about that frame, let's go back to that opening exercise. All of those questions that I were asking you was from a frame of a particular thing, right? Is English your first language? That was from a frame, right? If you're an English language learner, how you view this world is different. You know, it was from a frame of, have I ever felt threatened because of my sexual orientation, right? It's all about a frame and how we see things. And that frame then makes our brain do what I just called, it helps us be lazy, okay? After the 5th encounter, the brain becomes lazy and writes a script for what it thinks it knows. Think about that. After 5 times, it's like, oh, that's all people, right? That's all people. I said now I'm from Alabama, right? So if you know 5 people from Alabama, you've had 5 encounters with someone from Alabama, whatever you think about that is what you're going to consider, right? And that's what leads to unconscious bias. The best example I give people is, we haven't driven to work, some of us, for a while, but hopefully you could still relate. You used to drive home for work. You leave the office. You end up at home. Do you have any idea how you got there? Most of the time I didn't. I just ended up there. I couldn't tell you what was happening probably to the right or to the left, because what? We go the same way home typically all the time, and you just end up there. And so that is what our brain thinks is helping us. It thinks it's helping us. It doesn't mean any harm, but it just truly, truly tries to save us energy, and thus creates unconscious bias. So think about how many biases we have, but then think about particularly how they relate to these elements of diversity and these dimensions of diversity. We all have some bias in each of these areas. I promise you, we all do. So again, what is it? It can be conscious, where it's overt and intentional, and that really goes into, you know, when people discriminate, right? When particularly that kind of racism viewpoint in terms of power and trying to do something to a particular group, that's pretty conscious. But what we like to think about, particularly with belonging, what happens is more the unconscious, the unintentional, the automatic, the hidden, that really disrupt elements of belonging. Again, no one is immune. So if you say, I don't have any biases, that's the first and only time in my life I could ever use the word, you are a liar. My mom didn't like me saying liar. You couldn't say liar, right? But if you say you don't have any bias, then I am sure in that case, you are not telling me the truth. So again, stereotypes, widely held, but fixed. Again, that brain trying to put people in a box so that you can pull it out. So are stereotypes useful? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you tell me this snake, and I hate snakes, even having this snake on the screen makes my skin crawl. But if you tell me after so many times that snake could be poisonous, and I'm not going near a snake. I don't even, when we go into Petco, I told you I have 3 sons, and they'll be like, can we go over here to the snakes? I'm like, I'll be over here in the dog food. I don't even like going over there, right? It helps us. Stereotypes are useful. It's just the fact that we have to do better about making sure we don't use them overtly to the point that we cause issues. So again, when are they helpful? If you drop food on the floor, and particularly now, I am not picking it up and I'm not eating it, right? This is also stereotypes. This is a good, I saw a meme the other day. Now people, and it's not a good one, but it is in this case, somebody sneeze, we used to say what? God bless you. And we still should be saying that, or bless you, or some form. But now if you're in public and someone sneezes, because of our stereotype our brain has fit around coronavirus, we're like, what? Is she sneezing in public? Or like coughing. Oh my gosh, like one of my friends came to my house and she was coughing and I was like, oh, you gotta go. You might have, right? And again, it's just my brain. Supposedly you can't breathe, you cough. What's going on? And she's just like, I literally just choked on some water, right? But our brain has already started making these things. And again, things like safety. I'm from Baltimore, but I'm also going to tell you, I know which streets I'm not walking down in the dark. I don't care how open I am to, oh, everyone can get along. I'm not walking down there. I'm a woman, and my daddy told me, don't go down that street. So I'm not going down that street, right? So stereotypes are definitely useful. But again, they can impact negatively. And so that is where, as an organization, we have to do better. We have to make sure that we are not making places that have stereotype threat, where individuals that are not a part of the group feel that they can't move along or that they can't help. So again, there are negative impacts to it. We don't want these negative feelings. We don't want these missed opportunities. We truly, truly want people to feel that they can belong and that they can belong. So, some different biases, and I'm not gonna spend a great deal of time on this because you have this slide deck, and I'm telling you, there's a lot of research out there, but basically confirmation bias. What is confirmation bias? I promise you, the type of news you probably watch is confirmation bias. Same, the people that you're friends with on Facebook, 9 times out of 10 are people that like what you post, right? You are putting yourself in an environment where people confirm what you believe. It's what I call perception becomes reality, right? That you truly, truly just look for people that always confirm what you think. Affinity bias. This goes back to what I was talking about, that tribalism. I promise you, my undergrad degree is from Virginia Tech, and if I meet somebody that's from Virginia Tech, they automatically get a plus. Like, I'm like, woohoo, Virginia Tech. This impacts, for instance, recruitment. Like, where do we recruit? When somebody puts it on a resume, again, somebody that's familiar, similar, woohoo, they get a leg up. That's affinity bias. Observation bias. This is, you know, I tend to see what I expect to see. It's similar to confirmation bias, but think about it, and I believe this wholeheartedly. I bought a new car in December. I bought a Buick Enclave. When I bought it, I was like, I've never seen anybody really around here driving a Buick Enclave. Now every day I'm like, oh, it's a Buick Enclave. Oh, it is, and I'm pretty sure those aren't new cars either. I just never noticed it before, right? It's just confirming what I expect to see. And conformity bias. And this is what happens, again, a lot in our organizations. That whole, are they going to be a good fit? What we're really saying is, do we think they're going to conform when they come here? Are they going to act like us when they show up? Right? And that's a conformity bias, that we believe that certain people should do how we do. So, and we say it a lot, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But does that make it right? And then the last one, halo effect bias. And again, this just, again, this, and again, they kind of cross, but this same believes that obviously if I managed you, you must be phenomenal. So obviously when it's time for promotion, I'm probably going to be like, oh, they're of course great because they're attached to me because I'm great, right? So it's just that we see one great thing in that person and obviously they have to be great. And it goes to both ways though, right? If one person does one thing bad to us, I promise you, we think it's bad. So those are the biases that we share. I promise you, if you go on Wikipedia and put types of bias, they have like a list, I think, of 42, right? So there's a whole body of research around this, but those are the ones we see the most. So how does bias shows up in our workplace? All of these ways, even down to which holidays, quote unquote, do we celebrate in the office? What do we call those holidays, right? Which ones are we observing? Of course, our benefits. Again, where do we recruit? Which teams work together? Who gets access to the difficult assignments, right? Oh, well, he's the client we're trying to get. I'm going to send you because you guys went to the same school. Really? That's how we're doing business, but that's a bias that we're feeding into. This is all the ways it can show up at work. So perception, reality, these are just some images. I know you've seen several of these. They are definitely on a lot of websites now, but just think, again, you don't see the same thing I see. Somebody here may see a kind of goblet. I see two faces and I see both. Once I tell you I see two faces, right? Again, our perception becomes our reality. And if you don't believe it, there's Project Implicit. It's a Harvard national research project that's done by some Harvard researchers. Just Google Project Implicit, and you can take a whole exam, I won't say exam, assessment around maybe where your biases are, so that way you can become aware. I leave it like this. Everything you look for and all that you perceive has a way of proving whatever you believe, meaning research, whatever we want to believe, we can find research to support it. But the key is, will you do it differently? So what are you going to do differently in your organization in our last few moments? You're going to reimagine it. I promise you. If you have a diversity and inclusion committee, maybe call them the diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Maybe equity. Just think of it in different. We're not just talking about bringing people to the workforce anymore. We're not past that, particularly in the accounting profession. I'm not gonna say we're past that because we still got people we need to bring to the table. But please, when you bring them to the table, please invite them, as we're saying, to dance. Please play their music is another way we put it. Please talk with them that they can create a sense of belonging. We gotta go just beyond counting heads. We're going beyond counting heads. We're going to true inclusion and belonging. So what can you do? One, I'm gonna need you to educate yourself. So outside of today, I was so excited that over 160 some plus of you registered to join on a Friday morning about diversity. That's amazing. That is amazing. However, I'm not the expert alone. There are tons and tons and tons of information out there. So continue to educate yourself and then educate those in your firm. You're not the only decision maker in your firm. So we need every decision maker to be educated because we want to, at every moment that we're making a decision, we all want to stop and say, wait a minute, have we thought about all the biases that could come up? Oh, we have a new policy. Have we thought about how that's going to affect the people that have been at our company for 20 years? Oh, we have a new policy. Have we thought about how that's going to affect African-American, Hispanic? Have we done that, right? Have we done that? So we want to educate. Safe spaces, I talked about employee resource groups. You don't have to call them that. Just create a safe place where people can have conversations. Please, a place where they can invite people to recognize their bias. Again, it's like, the first, in any Alcohol Anonymous, Drug Anonymous, all of those programs, the very first step is to first admit. So we have to admit, I have bias. However, I'm going to work on them. I'm going to be conscious about my unconscious bias. Encourage participants to be emotionally vulnerable. If you're a leader, I plead with you, share. Talk about your own biases. It makes a culture where people believe, oh, he can say it out loud. Okay, I have one too, right? That people don't think they have to just get along to move along, as we say. Reflect on what you're here. Resist temptation for perfection. And again, conversation. Everywhere in here, you see what? Communicate. We have to communicate. So individually, what can you do? Be an ally. Ally is a hot word right now. There's whole workshops on allyship. But basically, what does it mean to be an ally? You're going to stand up. Silence is no longer acceptable. If you're somewhere where a joke is being made and you know it's wrong, you should say something. If you're somewhere where there is no person of a minority group, no person of a different gender, you need to stand up and say, hey, I want to speak on behalf of. Right? We can't be everywhere, but you have to be an ally when no one is looking. Again, courageous conversations, feedback, delegate. And like I said, please, please, please share those stories. Share your journey. Share the story of growth. This is how I grew up. Again, I told you I grew up in Baltimore with a dad. And I tell you right now, my dad listens to Rush Limbaugh and he's has some just as crazy views. I shouldn't say crazy, but some views I don't always agree with. And that's my dad, 80-year-old African-American man, right? I have to share those stories sometimes and say, Dad, I don't want to hear that right now. Or Dad, I want you to think about that differently, which of course he tells me then I'm 80, I'm not thinking about it differently, but we agree to disagree. And I tell him, in my day job, I teach people this. And he goes, okay, that's what you do, right? And we joke about it, but I also know I have to be that ally and share the stories with others. Lastly, what can you do? Time's up, wake up, right? We have to wake up. So again, it's just another way for you to think about it. Identify your bias, address them, examine your network immediately. If I tell you, if everyone is looking the same, acts the same, from the same place as you, doing the same things you do, you need, as I say, to change. It's kind of like what I tell my son. He used to tell me, again, he's in high school, and he's like, well, I'm making A's and B's. And he's like, my friends are making C's and D's. And I'm like, well, you need some new friends, right? We tell people you should not be the smartest person in your friend group. It relates to diversity and inclusion. Your friend group should not look exactly like you. And if it does, then you're almost sometimes maybe your biases may be amplified. So look for ways to expand your network and examine it. And again, proactively uncover. People will forget what you said. People forget what you did, but people will never forget what you made them feel. This is how you should walk away. I don't care about the conversations all the time around diversity and inclusion, how formal we need to be, and whether you know all the definitions, and whether you can tell me about social unrest and tell me the date and time that George Floyd was murdered and that you're anti-racist and like all of these terms. I could care less overall. What I want you to concentrate on is how are you making people feel? And if everybody that engages with you does not have the same experience, then you have some changes to make. I like to say that every time somebody enters the presence of Florence, Holland, they should always still walk away with the same feeling that Florence, she really cares. That Florence, she'll stand up for anybody. That Florence, I tell you, she'll help, as they tell us in the education world, she'll help the custodian just as much as she would help the principal, right? That's what you're trying to create in your organizations. If people that you're the leader and the people on the senior leadership team have something to say about you that is not consistent with the same people who are in your office that are the people that just, you know, type up the proposals, then you don't have maybe possibly an environment where belonging has come into play. So again, I want you to educate yourself. Don't get so bogged down in, well, I think I have perception bias. Let's just get bogged down on how do people and what would they say about how you made them feel. Focus on that. And if you can focus on that, I tell you, you will have environments where belonging and true inclusion exists. That's what you're looking for. How are we making people feel? Now, obviously, there's resources at the AICPA that we have that can help you to evaluate and assess how you're making people feel. We have an inclusion maturity model. We can talk to you about engagement surveys. There's lots of tools to figure it out from a data perspective. But if every day you just live in terms of how did I make someone feel today, I promise you, you will be well on your way to being an inclusive person that creates environments of belonging. If people have questions, Lindsay, I'll be happy. I'll look in the chat. Let's see. Someone says lots of energy. Sorry, it's Friday. This is me. And again, I told you I teach math. So I always have had to learn how to make a topic fun and exciting. Whether, I know I'm talking to groups of accountants, but a lot of you say you didn't love math either, but I have been in cases where people literally hate it. So I've always had to try to make it a little more exciting than that. Someone says, as a leader, how would I discuss my bias? Again, a lot of leaders right now are doing things such as town halls. A lot of people are doing small group focus sessions. That's one formal way, but I would just engage you that every time, like I said, you're making decisions, if it's a time to talk about, let's stop. Let's think about, you know, when I was about to make this decision, I had to, you know, go home and I slept on it. And I think I brought a bias of, you know, where I'm from into this conversation, right? Or next time that you're, you know, deciding about who to hire, you know, hey, let's step back. We got these 3 candidates, you know, we're saying that he or she is not a fit. What do we mean, right? The more you can embed it into the conversations, the decision-making that you're having, the more it'll become a part of the culture that even we're a culture that addresses bias. But yes, you can do those formal things too, such as town halls, small groups, going to the employee resource groups if you have them and talking to those individuals. You know, again, being personable, that I truly want to share with you how I feel so that I can make sure that I'm making you feel that you can share. That's a great question though. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I see the questions without messing up Lindsay's, how many CPEs you got, because I know you want your CPEs. Love the final message, keeping it simple. You have to be careful sharing, even if someone else has. It could be a setup. Well, that is true, Tammy. She said you have to be careful sharing, even if someone else has. I would say, you know, part of the belonging and the inclusion, though, is a basis that we have an environment where there is some level of trust, right? I think people would, sometimes I've talked this and people go, well, I think that's hand in hand with people feeling that they can trust where they are. And that is true. And so that's something else as leaders and managers that I hope that we work on. Again, a feeling of trust, which goes back to how do people feel, right? Do they feel that the environment is hostile to begin with? I doubt they're going to share a whole lot. But the more that you share, the more that it opens. So even simple things that when you have a team meeting, you know, I know she might be on, my boss, Crystal Cook, you know, she joined in February. She joined a team that we had already been in place. And so the very first part of our meeting is purely, we're just asking questions like, what is a recipe you've always wanted to make? You may go, what's that got to do with, you know, whatever we're talking about? But that conversation, we learned so much about each other and the types of foods and why that food was important to us. And, oh, I got that from my grandmother. And somebody else shared, well, I grew up with my grandmother because my parents died at a young age. Stuff that I didn't necessarily know about a team member that I'd worked with for 2 years, right? So you can start trying to build those little small elements of sharing and trusting outside of, I'm going to come and talk to you about unconscious bias. No. Let's start building elements and teams of trust with just simple things. And we try to do it. I hate it. I call it my start to Zoom calls or meetings are like, what's the weather where you are? Okay, we could look that up. And, oh, what did you do this weekend? Okay, let's ask some other questions. Like, of this weekend, did you spend time with your family? Tell me more about your family, right? We try to build these walls of, I can't talk about that at work. But when you do ask those type of questions, what's your favorite recipe? You know, what's a cake you always wanted to make? What's your favorite cocktail? By geez, people will tell you stories, right? They'll just start telling you stories. So try to build, yes, those elements of trust that aren't diversity themed. And then I promise when you want to segue into, tell me what it feels like to be an African-American woman. Now I'm ready to share that. But if I just met you and I don't trust you, don't come with, tell me what it's like to be an African-American woman. Because I'm looking at you like, why is that the first question? Don't you want to know about me as a person, right? So start small, Tammy. I promise, hopefully you'll see people's intentions and therefore it can build those elements of belonging. All right, let's see.
Florence, there was one more question that just came in. I don't know if you can read it and see if there's enough time to address, and if not, we can always get back to that participant.
Okay. I was brought up with parents who were always pushing for social justice. It was also learned from school, especially from my first Black teacher in 5th grade. One thing I've grappled with is stereotypes I have and stereotypes in my brain. Okay, any help on understanding? I'm trying to move it. Understanding. This is key. Again, it just goes back to even more that we do all have biases. We all, when you think about it, I say ingrained, but it is what we've learned. And same, even the word privilege, people now are like, oh, privilege. You didn't ask for it. You didn't ask for it, right? It is the things that we've been ingrained within, particularly in the U.S., the values of our family, the way the school systems are set up, to how colleges are embedded. We definitely have what's already in our brain, the things, again, to keep us safe, the things, again, that our brain has lumped together so that we can experience the world in a quicker and less energy. However, we have to, again, keep making the conscious decision to impact and affect our unconscious bias and our unconscious minds, right? And so how do we do that? We have to read. We read different things. Don't just read one book on the topic, of course. We wouldn't do that if we were trying to learn all the tax code. We'd be looking at multiple resources. So it's the same even about race and diversity and inclusion. It's the same in terms of trying to learn, to self-reflect. Self-reflection is key in this, right? I share with you lots of stories. The things that, again, we grew up doing and we're like, oh, well, that's just how we do it in our family. Sometimes you have to sit back and go, but why were we doing that? Were we creating a system of tribalism in our own family? Were we trying to, my family, they always said, don't go on that other side. But what were they really trying to say? So it does take self-reflection and some learning. It does not mean that you're putting those people down. I just told you my dad, I still love him. He still comes, we still visit. But I have had some self-reflections that everything he was trying to sometimes tell me to keep me safe, what he thought as raising a young Black girl in the inner city was his way of trying to support me and keep me safe. he meant well. I promise you, he means well, even still to this day. But I can again develop and grow because I have what? Read additionally and try to reflect. So just be self-reflective, try to read, try to encourage yourself around each other. And same, even in the profession, as I leave you, you know, that's what we have to do. We have to look at what the ways we used to do things, what did it do to our profession, you know, what systemically it may have set up, and how can we reflect, but now grow to do more, right? It's the same process, the same journey. Be reflective, what we learned, where we were, why we did it. That policy was created because blah, 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 blah. But let's look at where it puts us now in terms of diversity and inclusion. And then, yes, what can we learn so that we can what? Grow even more. So I would just hope that you would do it that way. Reflect and learn.
Florence, thank you so much. A lot of important takeaways, and I know I personally learned a lot from it. Very powerful quotes and exercises that I think we all learned a lot from. And from the hundreds of comments in the chat, I would say that I think our members were present today. So thank you all. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's program. I would like to thank Florence one more time for sharing her thoughts with us today. I encourage all of you to continue to check out our website for additional information in upcoming learning opportunities, including programs related to diversity and inclusion, as well as a whole slate of other virtual programs and conferences. I hope you enjoyed the program today and that you're able to turn in the insights you gained into action. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Change starts with each of us. So thank you all for participating and working to learn more on this important topic, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.